Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video, and if you're not new here, thank you so much for coming back for another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the top 5 podcasts that you should be listening to in 2023 for overall self-improvement and self-help. I am really on a wellness kick this year, a wellness journey. I'm feeling inspired this year and fresh and enlightened and excited and motivated. I'm listening to tons of podcasts. I'm reading more. I'm working out on a more consistent basis. Even this morning, I did a breathwork session with a support group that I'm in for modeling. I'm loving sharing these wellness tips with you guys. I did a realistic 2023 goals and intentions video last week, and the response has been amazing so far. So I'm really excited to see that so many others are looking to grow and inspire themselves this year. So I hope this video is helpful for you. If you guys take away any value, if you learn of a new podcast you haven't heard of, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I will be making videos every Sunday, so this is going to be a very consistent thing, talking about wellness, modeling, travel, entrepreneurship, and just overall self-care. So stay tuned for more, and let's get into it. The first podcast on this list is The Skinny Confidential. This podcast is hosted by Lauren Everts and Michael Bosstick. Lauren is the founder of The Skinny Confidential, so if you've seen those rollers or her blog, The Skinny Confidential, that's been her big thing. And then her husband Michael started Dear Media, so you'll see all these different podcasts now are Dear Media podcasts, and so they own this big media company that has all of these other podcasts underneath it, and I just love their content. They are super transparent and open about everything in their life. They are huge on routines and habits, and they're actually the ones that introduced me to habit stacking, and they have incredible guests on their show, which I love podcasts that have guests on because I get to hear different people starting their businesses or their habits or their routines or what makes them successful. And I just really love it. So all of the podcasts on this list, I've put down my favorite episodes, so I'll be recommending those to you guys. I've listed 4 favorite episodes from The Skinny Confidential. One is Claudia Sulewski, the YouTuber that I'm obsessed with. I love her. She was on and talked about her whole journey with building her YouTube channel, moving to LA, monetizing everything. It was just fascinating. So she's number 1 for me. Paige Mykovsky was number 2. It's a really new episode. She's the founder of Aviator Nation, and she was on talking about her whole journey with that. And then her brother founded Tom's Shoes. So whatever they're doing in that family is obviously the right thing, but Paige was on talking about her journey with Aviator Nation, which I just found to be really interesting. And then my third favorite is the episode with Jen Atkin. Jen is a celebrity hairstylist. I read her book. It's called Blowing My Way to the Top. I loved it. She does hair for all the Kardashians. She's on the show. She does like J-Lo, Hailey Bieber, the Hadids, anybody that you think of in the celebrity space, she's probably done their hair. And her story was really cool because she was living in LA as a hairstylist, like hustling in salons from Utah, and then she just made her way up to the top. So super interesting. My 4th favorite episode with them is another really recent episode with Paulina Poroskova, who is one of the greatest supermodels of all time. She grew up in communist Czech Republic after the war, and she got scouted by a modeling agency and made her way to New York and just totally has had so much success. She's so interesting, and I'm super into the modeling industry and stuff too, so that episode was really cool. But again, with The Skinny Confidential, they just ask so many really good questions. It's not a podcast where the host is overpowering. It's very much an interview, it's conversational, and they put out episodes, I believe, twice a week. So I will link all of the podcasts that I'm mentioning below, but I love The Skinny Confidential. The second podcast that you should be listening to this year is the Mel Robbins podcast. I found Mel Robbins when she was on Call Her Daddy. Mel Robbins is 54 years old. All of her episodes are about self-help, motivation, and she doesn't sugarcoat anything. So if you're saying you want to do something but you're not putting any action towards it, like, this is for you, because she will give you the kick in the butt that you need to just like be really real with yourself and reflect and then take the steps to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish. She always talks about how she started her podcast, I believe, at 50, and she was like, I wish I would have done it sooner, but I was letting the fear of putting out content and what are people going to think of me, I was letting that hold me back, which, hello, I can relate to that so much. I have 3 favorite episodes from the Mel Robbins podcast, and the first one is Your Dreams Are Not a Joke. This episode, I legitimately was almost in tears listening to this because it was so similar to my story, and I just was like, oh my gosh, I really needed to hear it, and I needed to hear it that way from you. It's also something about it is really comforting that she is older, because she's like old enough to be my mom and has lived so much life and has a really wise perspective. My second favorite episode is How to Manifest Anything You Want. I love her episodes about like manifestation and goal setting, because everything she does is very research based, which I appreciate because it helps me like rationalize it instead of being like, oh, manifestation. Like, she actually makes it seem legit. So I loved that episode. And then my third favorite episode is called You'll Never Be Happy Until You Start Doing This. Something about the way she talks and the topics she covers and the way she goes about it, and then she has an assistant coming in with facts. I just love it. She doesn't really have guests on. It's a solo podcast pretty much, but I really love it, and I think you should be listening to it in 2023 if you need that push. Podcast number 3 is Anything Goes by Emma Chamberlain. I love Emma Chamberlain, but I was late to the game. If you don't know who Emma Chamberlain is, she's a huge YouTuber. She's young, and she started doing YouTube videos like fashion hauls, and now she's huge in the fashion world. She has like a partnership with Louis Vuitton. She's the one at the top of the stairs at the Met now doing the interviews for Vogue. There's something about her that's just so raw and authentic, which I love. And her podcast is also a solo podcast. She never has guests on, and you can tell she's just laying in bed with a microphone, spewing her thoughts. It's not as much self-help, but it feels more like I'm listening to my best friend vent and talk about life and talk about issues in a very raw, vulnerable way. And she also, like Mel Robbins, doesn't sugarcoat anything. I have 4 favorite episodes from Emma Chamberlain. The first one is called There's a Culture Shift Coming, and there's part 1 and 2, so it's 2 episodes. She talks about how there's a shift coming between like celebrities, TikTokers, influencers, and that whole community, and I thought it was cool. My second favorite episode is called The Pressure to Overachieve, which is a very relatable topic. I like that she's close to my age, because a lot of her topics I really relate to, like overachieving and having that pressure. My third favorite episode of hers is called Body Image and Self-Acceptance. A lot of people that follow Emma Chamberlain know that she deals with body image issues, and she is like tiny, but that doesn't invalidate the way she feels. And I just really relate to a lot of the things that she said. I've spent a lot of years in the modeling industry, and I'm very thin, but I have had serious issues with body image, weight, nutrition, working out, my relationship with food, my relationship with exercise. And it's not even that she came on the podcast and like provided some way to fix the problem, but she just talks through it, and I love it. My fourth favorite episode of hers is called The Truth About YouTube, as I'm on this YouTube journey and she's huge in the YouTube community. I loved that episode and her transparency in that. So that is Anything Goes by Emma Chamberlain. The fourth podcast that you should be listening to this year is a new one that I found, and I'm very, very quickly becoming obsessed with it. It is called Trading Secrets by Jason Tartick. It's under the Dear Media umbrella, so Skinny Confidential owns Dear Media, and then he's one of their podcasts. This podcast is so cool, you guys. So Jason was on The Bachelor, got dumped. He was like top 3, got dumped on whatever trip they were on. He's very good looking. I remember him from his season, and now he's engaged to Caitlin Bristow. Before he went on The Bachelor, he worked in the finance world, and so he has like a really in-depth background there. After The Bachelor, he got thrown into content creating and influencing, like organically from that. I mean, the truth is the money you can make as a content creator is wild. He has on guests from a variety of industries, and they talk about their finances and how much money they were making at certain points. He talks about like reality TV show contracts and how much people were making on those. He had A-Rod on, and they talked about how much he was making at different stages in his career. So it's just very, very transparent about the reality of what you can do with your career, how much you can make. He literally shares how much he makes on his podcast reads and his Instagram influencing, and the guests do as well. As somebody that wants to get a little bit more into that world, it's a fascinating podcast. And even if you're not into influencing and content creating, he has so many different people on from different industries that just talk about finances, and I really recommend you check it out. So I have 4 favorite episodes from Trading Secrets. My number 1 episode from him I listened to yesterday at the gym, and it was with Danielle Bernstein from We Were What. She's a huge blogger. I've been following her forever. She's kind of controversial, but you can't deny the success that she has and how hard she's worked. She built her blog in 2010, dropped out of college, grew to build all these other brands. She's an insane networker and I loved her episode. My second favorite from Trading Secrets is Amanda Hirsch, Not Skinny and Not Fat. So he had Amanda Hirsch on. She runs a pop culture Instagram and also has a podcast under Dear Media called Not Skinny Not Fat. She is another one of those people that grew on Instagram pretty organically, and it took like 5 years for her to ever make money, but then once she did, she really did. Hearing her journey from not having a lot, working a 9 to 5, grinding on the social media account, not really knowing where it would take her, and then blowing up is just so insane. So I loved that. And then my third favorite was the episode with Nick Viall, part 1 and 2, so 2 episodes. And he has like done a lot of different things in the Bachelor world. He was The Bachelor, he was on The Bachelor, he was on Bachelor in Paradise. He was pretty controversial for a long time. And the way he went about his career after The Bachelor in LA was really not what I was expecting. And so I loved hearing that, and then they talk about The Bachelor as well. And then my fourth favorite episode from Trading Secrets was with Mark D'Amelio, who's Dixie and Charlie D'Amelio's dad. He talks about today's world of social media and how his daughters just like blew up and how much money they make on certain things, how they're investing their money, how they're staying creative and relevant in the content creating space. And so I loved that episode. And then the fifth podcast that you should no doubt be listening to this year, especially if you're into entrepreneurship, is How I Built This with Guy Raz. This is the podcast that got me into podcasts. I started listening to this probably in 2019, and then I launched my business in 2020. So I had like all this inspiration from these episodes. And he has the coolest entrepreneurs on and interviews them about their whole journey. And the way that these guests are so transparent and vulnerable on the show, it opened my mind to being like, these top entrepreneurs had no clue what they were doing for so long. And it just like brings everyone back down to a level playing field a little bit when you hear how they started and how they just said yes to things and like followed it, but they didn't know what they were doing. They were really broke for a while, those types of things. And so I love this podcast. Whenever I finish an episode, I'm like so inspired. I put down 5 favorite episodes, but I could list so many more. So my top episode from him is Kate Spade's episode. Kate Spade was on with her husband and they talked about their journey of building Kate Spade. She's from Arizona, she went to ASU, they went to New York together, she had her apartment full of handbags, and she was just like hustling in New York and eventually took off, and her story is incredible. And then my second favorite episode from How I Built This was actually the one with Rick Steves. So if you guys are into traveling, you know Rick Steves. He's like the OG travel blogger, this older man. He just travels the world, and it's not overproduced or anything like that. It actually can be kind of boring content sometimes, but he started like leading tours and writing these books. On top of that, my third favorite episode from How I Built This is the one with the Lonely Planet founders, Tony and Maureen Wheeler. This podcast blew my mind. They drove from Europe down through Asia and the East to I think Singapore. Their story is insane. They were going through Afghanistan, all these different countries to get down to Australia, and the whole time they were documenting their trips, and so they started putting out those little printed Lonely Planet travel books, and now it's become this huge business, the Lonely Planet. So that one was fascinating. And then I have 2 more favorites from How I Built This, one being Airbnb with Joe Gebbia. He's the founder of Airbnb, and he talks about how he was literally letting people crash on his couch for money and hustling around San Francisco with like kind of rundown places and renting them out, and it was so interesting. And then the other one was with Casey Neistat. He's a YouTuber, very, very big in the YouTube community. His editing is extremely unique, and he's had crazy opportunities from being a YouTuber, and he was on talking about his whole journey with that. I think podcasts and the information that you can get from a good podcast episode is insane. I've learned like a different way of thinking from these podcasts because you hear from these successful people and how they did it, and it's so scrappy and it's so unique and it's not what you would think initially. And then I have to give an honorable mention to We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach. I'm currently reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and I didn't really know about her before this, but she's married to Abby Wambach and they have a podcast together. I love the book, I love the podcast. I haven't listened to enough of the podcast to really like put it above these other ones, but I do love the content they're putting out, and so I just have to give an honorable mention to them because I know I'm gonna start liking this podcast a lot more this year. So those are the top 5 podcasts that you should be listening to this year. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much. You're amazing. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Instagram here, and I will see you guys next Sunday for a new video.